This is what we call a rifle musket. We call it a musket because of the barrel length, 39 inches. We call it a rifle because it did have spiral grooves cut in the bore to allow it to shoot with force, distance, and accuracy. Distance could throw a bullet up to 1,000 yards. Force, at 1,000 yards, the bullet could penetrate 3 1/2 inch pine boards. More than enough energy to cause a lethal wound. Accuracy, a trained soldier with a bit of practice could be expected to hit a man-sized target out to 200 to 300 yards. Now you look at this gun, you'll notice, I hope you'll notice it's a little bit different from our modern guns. Modern guns load through the backside. Modern guns are repeaters. This is a single shot weapon and ammunition goes down the muzzle. Despite all those bad Hollywood movies we grew up watching, where the soldier flipped open a trapdoor, put in a metallic cartridge, that gun was actually invented after the Civil War. But they used them in Civil War movies because it was too hard to teach actors how to use a muzzle loader. They could teach them how to use a breech loader. To load this gun, back in the Civil War days, the soldier would have reached into a leather pouch called a cartridge box. This is where he would have kept his ammunition. Ammunition for a gun like this is different from our modern guns in that it is not a metal cartridge, but something called a paper cartridge. Nothing more than a rolled up paper tube with a bullet in one end and gunpowder at the other. To use this cartridge, the soldier would flip up the tail end and put it between his teeth like so to tear it open. And by the way, this is the origin of the Army dental regulations. You had to have good teeth to do this. And I digress. Somebody recently showed me some documentation where I think it was up in Connecticut. There were 5 young men who really did not want to go off to war. They had something called conscription back in them our days. We call it the draft today. But these 5 young men got conscripted and they didn't want to go. Their solution to not going was 3 of them had every tooth removed from their mouth so they couldn't tear cartridges. The other 2 soldiers had this finger, the trigger finger, removed. They really didn't want to go. But anyway, getting back to the story, we use this cartridge, we tear it open with your teeth like so. This exposed the gunpowder. Soldier would then pour the gunpowder into the gun, then it'd seat the bullet on top. Now the bullet just didn't drop down there, it had to be rammed in place for every shot with something called a ramrod. And I know what some of y'all are thinking, poor guy's getting shot full of holes loading this gun. Well, they taught these guys how to load, but they didn't waste a lot of time teaching these guys how to aim. So a lot of bullets were fired for no purpose. And as a Civil War soldier, you could have been up there loading your gun, getting shot at. It didn't mean you got hit. But once you were loaded and ready to shoot, the guy who just shot at you and missed, what's he doing? Reloading. So it worked out about even. It paid to be a good shot. In training the soldiers how to load their gun, this step they strongly emphasized. Take out the ramrod. And as silly as that might sound, a lot of new soldiers in their first battle had a tendency to get just a little bit excited, forget to take this thing out, and they would shoot it. And yes, it could be a lethal projectile, but if you shot away your ramrod, you couldn't reload your gun. And all you had was a heavy, expensive club with a very short reach. So they emphasized, soldier, take out the ramrod, put it back where it belonged so you could use it again. Guns loaded, still not ready to shoot. Last step was to prime the weapon. This contained the ammunition. This contained the primers. And the primer was nothing more than a little piece of copper or brass stamped into the shape of a little top hat. But inside this little top hat was a chemical called fulminated mercury. And this is what's going to set off the gunpowder, making the gun go bang. You could have all the bullets in the world, but if you did not have a cap for every bullet, you weren't going to be able to shoot your gun. You had to have a cap for each shot. Cap was a one-shot deal. Bang goes the gun, reload it, fresh cap would be put on. Cap goes on the gun, like so. Trained soldier could get off 3 shots a minute. I know I'm taking my time, but I want everybody to see. In battle, they'd be a whole lot faster. Gun's now ready to shoot. Squeeze the trigger, hammer falls, hits the cap. Chemical in the cap explodes, shoots a jet of flame inside the gun, setting off the gunpowder, firing the weapon. And that's how one of these guns worked. And this was state of the art back in the Civil War days. If you have sensitive hearing, now's the time to cover your ears. This will be a little loud. Hammer back to full top, weapon on the shoulder, sight the target, squeeze the trigger, and like so. As loud as that bang was, it could have been louder. I fired a blank. Gunpowder, no bullet. We don't shoot bullets out here for safety reasons. For the safety of us park workers, for our visitors. We love return visitation. While we want your visit to be enjoyable, we don't want you to go back and say, you need to go to Port Hudson, they shoot real bullets at you. So we don't shoot bullets, And for the safety of the animals in the park, we don't shoot bullets. But if there had been a bullet in the gun, that would have compressed the gunpowder, the bang would have been a lot louder, and the gun would have kicked about like a 20 gauge. Any questions about the musket?
What's the average distance? Was there an average distance?
The average soldier was lucky if he could hit a target out to 200 to 300 yards. So, you know, about a couple of 2 to 3 football field lengths. But the gun could actually shoot further than that. No questions.
You said it was rifled?
It was a rifled weapon, yes, sir.
So pretty accurate.
Pretty accurate. And it did not fire a round ball, it fired a lead conical ball with a hollow base, what they called the mini ball. And the way the bullet was supposed to work is when the gunpowder went off, the blast would go up in the hollow base, causing the soft lead to expand to grip the rifling to make it spin. Yes, sir.
What kind of rifles were made in the South?
They basically they copied everything that was made in the North.
Springfields.
Springfields. And they had some private manufacturers that were copying a 2-band rifle called the Mississippi rifle. And they were manufactured by about a dozen different contractors. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Was there a way that a bayonet could be placed on the end of it?
That is my second part. No, very good question. Every soldier that had one of these had one of these. And this was the soldier's backup weapon. When he ran out of ammunition, or the gun malfunctioned, or the bad guy ran up on him before he could reload, the soldier could fight and protect himself with a bayonet. One of the first things the soldier did before going into battle was putting on the bayonet, so it was ready to use. The blade was offset from the muzzle so the gun could still be loaded and fired with it attached. This was not a cutting instrument. Well, Mike, if you can't cut the guy, what good is it? Well, you didn't want to have a cutting instrument on a muzzleloader because every time your hand ran up and down the blade, what would happen? Well, what is it good for? It was a stabber, not a cutter. You put this sharp point on the end of this 10-pound gun, it was relatively easy to run it right through a man. And the blade being 18 inches long, you could run them right through, pin them to the ground with it. The blade was triangular shaped to make it strong. It was also triangular shaped because they found out if you stuck somebody with a flat blade, the wound would fold on itself. A 3-sided instrument would cause a puckering type wound that could not be pinched shut. The soldier, if he survived being stabbed, he'd have to see a doctor to stop the bleeding. Besides poking people with this thing, this was the U.S. Army's first multi-tool. Not only could you poke people with it, but it was good in camp. Let's say our Civil War soldier had a piece of meat to cook but no frying pan. Jab that piece of beef on the end of the blade and we're having shish kebabs tonight. Or reverse it, use it as a pot hook to lift a pot off the fire so you wouldn't burn your fingers. Also, it made a pretty good tent peg. Back in them days, no lanterns, no flashlights, candles. Light a candle, hold it in your hand, what happens?
Right.
Hot wax drips down and burns your hand, right? The smart soldier puts the candle in the socket, hold it from the offset blade, wax drips, doesn't burn him. Gets tired of carrying it, stick it in the ground, and not have to worry about it falling over and starting a fire. And then there was one last gruesome use. If you remember from the audio visual, Sunday, June 14th, 1863, the Federals attacked Port Hudson. It was 3 days before they got around to burying those poor boys. And you can imagine what them poor boys must have looked like 3 days baking in a hot Louisiana June sun. The solution to dealing with the bodies was they took all the discarded bayonets, they put them in a fire. When the blades got hot and the metal got soft, they bent them into hooks. And rather than having to touch the bodies with their hands, they'd hook the bayonets to a piece of clothing or equipment to drag the body to the grave, what they called a body hook bayonet. So it had multiple uses. Oh, one last thing. Musket bayonet combination is 6 feet. There was a reason for it. During the Civil War, you had the cavalry, guys mounted on horses. One of the primary weapons of a cavalryman was a saber. And theoretically, a man sitting on the back of a horse with a saber in his hand had a reach of 6 feet. To make the man on the ground equal to the man on the horse, musket bayonet combination was 6 feet. Now it's a reaching contest to see who can poke who first. All right, that's it. I want to end up my program here because I want to give y'all time in the museum. We got a beautiful museum with lots of good exhibits. If you do have any questions during the course of your visit, I'll be available, and Daniel will be available to answer any questions. Please, I hope y'all enjoy your visit.
Thank you, sir.